Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to go. The salad has been staged on your tables, and we're going to get going with our program. So if you'd please find your seats, we'd appreciate it. Is there anybody that doesn't have the right seat or doesn't have a seat? Because come yell at me, I'm the guy that does it. No? Thank you all for being here. My name is, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rich Goucher. I am the NEAR president, and it gives me great pleasure to greet you here today. As a youngster, I began at Plainville Stadium watching legends like Dave Alkis, Ron Wyckoff, and Jap Membrino wow the fans. Later on, our brew crew owned and crewed modified tour cars and ended up racing and winning with my childhood idol, Reggie Ruggiero. Now I have been honored to lead this great organization into the future. On behalf of our members, thank you all for joining us as we induct the 2019 class of honorees into the Hall of Fame. Every one of us here are racing enthusiasts. We were born and bred into it, or were introduced into it and got hooked, or know someone that has dedicated their lives to it and is being honored here today. There are many clubs that race vintage automobiles around the speedways of New England. NEAR is the only one that dedicates itself toward promoting the rich racing history of our region and honors our standout representatives. We have oval track, drag racing, track principals, and television media giants being inducted here today. And we could not be more proud of them. We thank you for your dedication to our sport. An event of this magnitude cannot be presented without the assistance of key individuals to see it through to completion. I would like to personally thank all who have had a part in producing this event. On your table, there are copies of a Chris Economaki book for you to take home. They are courtesy of author Dave Argabright. And could you please give him a round of applause for his gift? Thank you. Additional copies are available over by the NEAR T-shirt booth if you'd like to take one home. I'd like to thank Skip Matzek for making sure they arrived here safely and for distributing them. I appreciate that very much. We also have some remarkable collectible items available for our silent auction tables over on the side, so please pay them a visit if you're so inclined. And to the rest of our guests, I sincerely hope that you enjoy your day. To start it off, let me introduce Reverend Don Rivers for our invocation.
Thank you. Before we go to the Lord in prayer, just share a little indication of where we're going. I was in the pits down at Charlotte at the dirt track on Friday afternoon talking with a young gentleman that was amazed that I was old enough to have watched Richie Evans race. And there's young kids out there. He says, I'm taking some vacation time and I'm heading to the Northeast because I want to see some of that good asphalt racing. So there's another generation coming behind us, and today we celebrate where we've been and those that paved the way. Let's pray to our Father. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather together around this table to celebrate those that have made an impression upon our lives. Lord, we're thankful that we were born in an era that we could appreciate those that just sacrificed so much to entertain us. Lord, as we enjoy this meal together, as we celebrate those being inducted today, we just ask that your blessing would be upon us. Lord, that we wouldn't take for granted all that you have provided. And Lord, that you would help us to remember where we come from and look forward with hope to the days coming ahead. Lord, bless this day, bless this time, and look over us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Don. And now, if you would all, those of you that are able, would you please stand as the voice of Seekonk Speedway, Kevin Boucher, would do our national anthem.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me as we pay tribute to this great nation. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the twilight glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Appreciate it very much. Nice job. We're all set to go. Please enjoy your meal. Okay, while we're waiting for dessert to come out and our tables to be clear, we're going to get going with some of the preliminary awards. I do have a gentleman here that I would like to give him a few minutes to talk about the Northeast Motorsports Museum and some of their events that are coming up. I'd like to introduce to you Tom Nedishin, who is the Executive Director of the museum.
Hi everyone, how's it going? Just a few quick announcements from the upcoming happenings at the Northeast Motorsports Museum in Loudon, New Hampshire. We'll be hosting a holiday at the museum upcoming on December 8th from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Enjoy food, drinks, meet Santa, and support our mission of preserving the Northeast Motorsports Museum, Northeast history at the Northeast Motorsports Museum. Also, the Historic Motorsports Expo, which Near supported last year, will return on May 2nd, 2020. In 2019, the event brought together 52 historic cars outside of the museum, in addition to the 30 cars and motorcycles inside of the museum. We're looking to bring this back and make it bigger and better next year, and hope to have even more support in 2020. The date will be always the first Saturday in May. Next year it will be May 2nd, 2020. And also in the works right now, we're in the preliminary stages of getting together, reviving the vintage celebration at the New Hampshire Motor Speedway. The museum will be in charge of the event. It will take place during the Full Throttle weekend, September 12th and 13th. It will be a two-day event on Saturday and Sunday, and we're in the beginning stages of forming this. We will be running it this year. The Northeast Motorsports Museum will be headlining it and running the event. So if you have any questions about the running of the vintage celebration at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, the revival, please see me. I'm seated at table 12. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Tom. And now it's my great, great pleasure to turn the podium over to your MC for this evening and this afternoon. And he actually needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him anyway. Matt Buckler has probably got the most unique euphemisms of anybody in motorsports, and I'm sure you'll hear plenty of them today. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Buckler.
Okay, I'm really not sure what a euphemism is, but I'll do my best. It is great to be back here and to see such a big crowd at our annual Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Now, the question we always ask when we start, how many people are here for their first dinner? The Yellow Stripers. Well, we have a few people here for the first time, and the question that they always ask, what is the Hall of Fame all about? It's very simple. It's about greatness. And the one thing about the New England Hall of Fame dinner, no matter where you're sitting, greatness is not far away from you, and we're going to prove it. Will the past members of the Hall of Fame and all our past inductees, could you please stand up to be recognized? Now, there are two people in particular that we want to point out. One, there are legends in this sport. When you go through them. There's Bug Stevens, and then there's everybody else. A member of the first class in the New England Hall of Fame, Bug Stevens, on table 24. And also sitting on table 24, he was in the second Hall of Fame class. He had some tough health issues during the week, but he has come here to support the class of 2019. He was the only driver ever to win at least one race at every Connecticut track, Bill Greco, from the class of '99. So now let's get the party started. One of the oldest awards in the history of NEAR, the Murata Award, and to make the presentation, a Hall of Famer himself and one of the most prolific publishers in motorsports, Lou Boyd.
Thank you, Matt. So how about that Frank Sinatra hat? Good work. Anywhere you go today, you hear about 3M, the enormous Fortune 500 company that emerged out of nowhere and now seems to do just about everything. And school kids for generations have grooved on tales of the Three Musketeers who fought for good causes with swords and muskets. But you know what? Right here in New England, we've had the coolest of all, the three racing M's. The late Russ Conway, Charlie Elliott, and Ken Smith. Quite famously, Russ the journalist was the mouth, Charlie the track builder was the muscle, and Kendall the banker was the money. It all began at a strike at Oscar Ridland's Pine Speedway back in 1965. Somehow, at that moment, a curious alliance formed between teenager Russ, late 20-something Kenny, and 50-year-old Charlie, each as different as a straight axle and a ball joint. A pit full of drivers, including Ollie Silva, Don McLaren, Eddie West, Paul Richardson, and Bentley Warren, left town to follow them on an adventure that lasted for over 4 decades. Along the way, they built and operated Star Speedway, rejuvenated Lee Raceway, and Hudson and Canaan Speedways. They loaded them with gutsy shows through their New England Supermodified Racing Association. They also went on the road. Phenomenally, they ran over 1,000 events, including more than 10,000 races at 33 tracks, from Scrub Country up in Canada, way down to the infamous Hialeah Speedway in Florida. Despite the drama and ferocity of the racing with those wild Nesma Supers, there was a real joy about their approach. There were big purses, minimum rules, and few hassles. Before racing at Canaan, I called Charlie to ask him if my car would be all right. "No problem, Lou," he thundered. "We have 2 rules. The driver has to be behind the engine, and the driver can't be drunk. But we are up here in northern New Hampshire, so sometimes we have to be a little bit lenient on that second one." In any case, after the checker, the typical Nesma pit would be awash with that Bud Light. So, as Russ would say, tell your friends. Although the Supers were their trademark, the 3 racing M's would feature just about anything. Snowmobiles to run what you brung. They knew everyone in racing. Curiously, among their most successful promotions were those incredible showdowns and champions when they brought and pioneered Cup stars like Dale Earnhardt, Buddy Baker, Richard Petty, Ron Bouchard to race against the locals at places like Hudson, Lee, and Stafford. Russ, Charlie, and Kendall were all near Hall of Famers, certainly among the most productive of all our members. When Russ passed 2 months ago, it was the symbolic end of a great era, a kind of racing that we will never, ever see again. So, how about now a moment of silence as we honor their memories with the Frank Marotta Award. Thank you. And their plaques will be hung in perpetuity in the Pro 9 Museum in Pawtucket and the Northeast Motorsports Museum in Loudon. Thank you.
During the past few years here at the Hall of Fame dinner, we've honored people in journalism with the Charlie Mitchell Jack Rada Award. And to make this year's presentation, he restores cars, and who better to tell us the winner of this year's award than Mark Alden.
This year's award goes out to a guy who really, really deserves it. In racing, running a speedway, you need good announcing. And if you don't have good announcing, keep the people entertained, you have nothing. This year here, this award goes to one of the best, like being squeezed like toothpaste out of a tube, as he would say, Matt Buckler.
You know, I'm looking at the table over here to my right. I think you got the wrong guy. You know, thank you very much. And I'm working on the repertoire for next year, and hopefully it will meet to your approval. I'm all over the award like a white jumpsuit on an Elvis impersonator. A few years ago, one of the legends died. He was also a member of the first class in 1998, Ron Bouchard. To honor his memory, every year we make the presentation of the Ron Bouchard Award. And to announce this year's winner, Paula Bouchard. Okay, and helping us on this presentation is Guy Bouchard.
Chad.
Oh, Chad Bouchard, who is a son of Paula and Ron.
Thank you. My father, Ron Bouchard, was a man who looked at everything with a very strong set of values. He always said that on the track he believed in racing hard, but in racing fairly. If the best he could finish was second or third after a fair fight, that was okay, and it was certainly better than an unfair victory. He had high standards when it came to what was acceptable and what was not. He also had high standards when it came to friendships. He enjoyed spending time with people who were genuine, sharing a laugh with people who were real. The recipient of this year's Ron Bouchard Memorial Award, his dear friend George Summers, shared the same values. Their friendship spanned 50 years. After both of them retired from racing, they became travel companions and golf partners. For them, every golf outing was the same. Each would accuse the other of cheating, and at the end of the day, they'd sit down in the clubhouse and unwind over a beer. They loved the competition, but they loved each other's company even more. That was the same way they went racing, right from the start. I'm sure most of you know the stories of my dad as a teenager at Seekonk, following George in every practice session. And how George would always help this newcomer. George always laughed when he remembered his car owner, Ken Curley, scolding him, "Listen, George, we're not running a driving school for that kid. You don't have to show him everything." I've learned from countless conversations that George was as fair with others as he was with my dad. Although his driving career lasted more than 25 years, and although he won track championships and feature races all over New England, he didn't seem to have an enemy in the sport. Fans admired him, and his fellow drivers respected him. I'm sure that this was a direct result of the style that earned him the nickname Gentleman George. In 1983, he accomplished something truly rare. He announced that he was planning to retire, and then won the last two races he ever ran, one at Oxford Plains in Maine, and the other right here in Connecticut at Thompson Speedway. In retirement, George has been inducted into a few different Hall of Fames, including this one back in 2000, and he has also received a long list of honors. We are pleased to add one more to that list. The Bouchard and Summers families have shared so many moments, happy and sad. It's nice to see members of both families here today as we pay tribute to a race well run and a life well lived. Just as George was, I know Maggie Summers is a friend to just about everyone here in this room. I'd like to ask her to come up and accept the award in George's name.
I know that George would be very humble and truly grateful for this recognition, but more so for the recognition of Ron Bouchard, Chad, and Paula. They were our second family, and this is a double honor for us. As the two families are here today, Paula, he called his little rosebud, and Chad. And Ronnie and George spent, I can't tell you how many times, vacations, everything. He was part of our family, and to receive this honor today, truly grateful for this great honor. Thank you.
Crew that followed Ron Bouchard and George Summers around the golf course, it would have been the highest rated reality show of all time. It would have put Madhouse to shame. Our next award honors one of the, I think he was one of the founding fathers of NEAR. He certainly was one of its most charismatic characters. He got a lot of things done. He always had an opinion, and he was always looking for the best interest of NEAR. The Dan Pardee Award. And to make the presentation, this is his favorite day of the year, Pete Newsham.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to cover this like a bandage on a mummy. And Vinny, this is what I look like without a hat or hair. Danny Pardee was not only a fixture in New England motorsports racing, but he was also the backbone behind NEAR and the Hall of Fame. This award is given out every year for people who dedicate to everything behind the scenes, for the preparation, so this goes off flawlessly, sometimes without a hiccup, but people always regain composure and we make it work. And it's also a time that we thank all the past veterans and the new inductees. We congratulate you. And this is an award this year goes out to somebody that I know has contacted every Hall of Famer, past and last year, this year, about t-shirt sizes, plaques, everything. It's somebody that behind the scenes that has worked very hard, very diligent over the last few years to make sure this goes off flawlessly. And Danny would be very proud to have this person carry his name on since 2008. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's inductee, or the honoree of the Danny Pardee Award, is Mr. Paul Massey, past president.
Thank you very much. There is something about the Hall of Fame that attracted me to NEAR many, many years ago. I'm certainly not a racer, although I do a pretty good job in the pits. If you need somebody to polish wheels, clean windshields, see me after the program and I'll give you my number and I gladly will do that. But that's all I do. I'm one of those persons since 1949 have been going to auto races, mostly in Connecticut, also Seekonk, and the tracks that closed in Massachusetts. Yes, I am one of those railbirds, one of those persons who buys a ticket, sits and enjoys the beautiful sport of auto racing. I think the coolest job in racing, though, is not doing windshields or wheels. I think the coolest job, I know there's some people here that have cool jobs in racing. I don't know where Mike Joy is, but he certainly has a cool job in racing, and there are a lot of people that do, including Matt Buckler. But I think the coolest job is the guy who stands on this flag stand and throws the green flag for the beginning of any feature race at any track. Or if they go to a drag race, at home as I see it, Mr. Doyle, when the Christmas tree drops down and it's a rush. It really, really is. I don't know what it is to go that fast. I have no clue. The last ticket I received was for talking on my cell phone. So I don't know how fast I was going, but fast enough that the policeman chased me for 5 miles before I stopped. Anyway, I don't know what that speed is like, but it's going to be absolutely awesome. Even the supers, when the supers race at Thompson, I am always amazed, just absolutely amazed by what they do. But however, NEAR is run 100% by volunteers. Yes, we have vendors, but we are all volunteers. No one does their job by themselves.
And I know, speaking to all of you who have something to do with racing, there isn't an owner, a track owner, a car owner, or a driver who does it all by themselves. NEAR fits right in because we do not do anything by themselves, and of course that includes me. There are some people I want to thank, however. Certainly the boards of directors that I have worked with over the last 4 or 5 years, I really would like to thank them. The selection committee for the Hall of Fame, its chairperson, Pete Newsom, Mark Alden is vice chair, and Bones Boussier also has a lot to do with conducting the business of selecting, which is really quite a process. They do one heck of a job. The writers of the plaques, now that might seem, we read it and say, well, somebody's going to do it. One of those persons from the Veterans Committee is Nick Tito, who's written the plaques, and Justin St. Louis from the great state of Vermont. I was in Vermont last year. We all know it's the Green Mountain State. The number plate, registration plates are green, and it says the Green Mountain State. I don't know if they got an identity crisis. I have no idea, but we have a lot of people from Vermont who come to this gathering and who are in the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt about it. Two other people that I would like to thank, and I want to just give a little report on Val Lasser. Val was stricken. Now, he had the job of putting the booklet together. And he does a fantastic job every year. But Val was not feeling well in the closing days of putting the booklet together. And as soon as he finished and got it off to the printers, he asked his daughter Valerie to take him to the doctor. And he was in a hospital for 10 days. We got the job done. And that's where Val is. Val is home. He receives 2 IVs every day. And he's sort of kind of quarantined when I picked up the books and all those kinds of things. I did it away from Valerie's house, and she gave me all the stuff that I needed for today. So Val has been a tremendous support of the years that I was president, and especially working on the Hall of Fame. He is just incredible, the amount of information that he has, and he's willing to share it, but he was a real support to me for a long time. The other person who fits in that category who's going into the Hall of Fame in a little while is Rick Mariscal. Rick Mariscal is responsible, really, for putting the Hall of Fame vehicle, the museum, the mobile museum, on the map. No doubt about it. He has done less recently, and I've been doing more, and along with Rich Goucher, getting the truck around to different tracks and different venues. But he certainly had a lot to do with it. He, too, is a wealth of information when it comes to tracks, to racing, and people. When I go, and I did, but especially when I was president, travel throughout New England, usually there are a couple people that they want to know about. One is Rick Mariscal. The other is Val Lasser, and the other is R.A. Sylvia. So I'm telling you, we have people in there that really have been tremendous in getting the word out on what the Hall of Fame really, really is. A couple other people I want to thank is Rich Goucher. Rich, for the last 5 years or so, has been responsible for all reservations. So he's the president now. You've already met him. If you have a complaint, don't see him today. But he's the one who's really in charge of doing everything. The other, of course, is Mr. Buckler. Matt is always, the tracks that he works, always gives us a lot of kudos for what we do in putting this Hall of Fame together. It is really, really, really a tremendous pleasure to be part of it. And I think Pete mentioned that, yes, the last 5-6 years I've been speaking to all the Hall of Famers. You all called me back at least once. The Webbers probably me more often than most. But anyway, and that was what my role was, is to make sure that all the Hall of Famers and the family members have a nice day today, one that they can remember and have a lot of memories from. And all of you who are here today have something to do with auto racing. So, I bow to you. I really do. Thank you very much.
To the races. That is an amazing stat. And you know what that means for an announcer? Job security. The Veterans Committee, headed by Mark Alden, and what that encompasses, drivers who drove during the early years of motorsports, They are full-fledged Hall of Famers. They just started their careers earlier than most. Getting ready to tell us who this year's 3 inductees are, Mark Alden.
Before we start with the Veterans Committee, this has been a tough year for NEAR and all the racing people. I'm just going to give you a list of the people that have passed on. If we could have a moment of silence, please, because we lost a lot of great people, starting with Georgie Summers, Cliff Nelson, Sonny O'Sullivan, Mike Stefanik, Russ Conway, Bob Potter, and Mary Hodge. Could we just have a moment of silence for these people, please? Okay, what a show we have today. What a feature lineup. Mike Joy, Vinnie Hu, Wayne Dion. I mean, this is unbelievable, these people, you know? Also, you know, we're here honoring the veterans, so to speak, but I have to give a shout out to a youngster who's done really well. Megan Fuller, a 5-time Stafford winner this year at Stafford. 17 years old. Who says the kids aren't interested in racing, okay? Okay, our first veteran is Dick Beauregard, a 2-time modified champion at the London Waterford Speed Bowl. His aggressive style won 64 races from 52 to 62 in the modifieds and non-Fords. The Norwich, Connecticut driver won at Plainfield Stadium. He drove the Black Panther #1 and the Bill Congdon #76. His final season saw 14 wins, driving the Kinzel #53 to the title. He passed away in 2011, and Dick Beauregard is now in New England Racers Hall of Fame. Our second is Eddie Ing, the Nashua, New Hampshire driver, won his first race at 16. A professional driver, he finished 10th in the inaugural stock car race at Daytona Beach in 1936. He swept the 1938 Midget and Stock Car Championships in Florida. He found his home racing midgets and returned to New England for 1939. He won the 1939 Mid-Season Championship at Fall River, plus the 1930 New England Midget Racing Association. In 1940, Yankee Midget Racing Championship. He was victorious at Athol, Fall River, Pines, and Riverside Park, Sturbridge, and Topsfield. He later worked as a flagman, and he passed away in 1952. And last is Dick Schurock, the Boston native driver, began his career in 1928 and found success in the big cars, midgets, and stock cars. He won more than 50 races from 1932 to 52, including the Aluminum Field, Bayless Stadium, Dracut, Keene, Newmarket, Riverside Park, Topsfield, and Weymouth. During the post-war boom, he drove midgets for Davison and Oscar Ritalin. He drove a Ted Koopman Offie with Ed Castelline and Joe Salito. His teammates was Johnny Bernardi and the Ed Stone Offie. The 3-time England Big Car Championship died in 1983.
And our first 3 Hall of Famers are on the board. So that is a great way to get things started. Before we start our introductions of the Elite 8, the class of 2019, it's time to take attendance. Is there anybody here today from Maine? What about, we do have some, what about Vermont? Okay, do we have anybody here from New Hampshire? How many are here from Massachusetts? Well, a big contingent from the Bay State. What about Rhode Island? How many people do we have here? Half of the building is from Rhode Island. What about the home team? How many are from Connecticut? Boy, I think Rhode Island won that battle. And how many people can't wait for this to go over so they can go down south for warmer weather and lower taxes? Okay, it is time to get the party started with our class of 2019. Our first presenter was a great driver at Seekonk Speedway. He won about 30 races in many divisions. The cadet, the modifieds, the pro stocks, the SKs. He also won races at Thompson and Stafford and won an SK championship at Seekonk. Ed St. Angelo.
Thank you, Max. I'm going to try to jam about 40 years in 5 minutes here, if I could. I'm proud to be able to introduce a guy I've been friends with for about 40 years. He's a husband, a father, a provider, a businessman, as well as a racer. That guy is Vinny Anarumo. A lot has happened in those 40 years, and I will be going over his accomplishments, as well as what I might consider his entrepreneur skills. And in speaking of those skills, I had to check with the powers to be here to make sure that nothing I said could get him uninducted. His career has spanned about 40 years. He started as a car owner in a B division at Seekonk in 1969, and he jumped into the driver's seat in 1972. 1 year later, he was the Class B division champion. In 1974, Vinny joined the modified ranks at Seekonk. He competed in that division through 1978. Now, he didn't just stick around Seekonk. He ventured out to many other New England tracks. In the 79 season, he raced at Stafford Motor Speedway, where he was named Rookie of the Year. Then came 1983, big year. That was the year of the name change. It's no longer Vinny Anarumo, that nobody could could say that last name. It's now Vinny Who. A name that has stuck forever. And for some that might not know, that name was given to him by the multi-time modified champion, the late Richie Evans. It all came about during a 100-lap event at Seekonk Speedway. Vinny was all over the back bumper of Richie. And he kept dogging him for most of that race. And I was there, and I believe if it hadn't been for a lap car in those closing laps, that might have been Vinny's first win. But as it was, Richie called back to his then crew chief, Billy Nazowitz, over the radio, and asked who this guy was all over his back bumper. Well, Billy, like a lot of announcers, he tried his best, but when he got to Vinny, he murdered that last name. And that's when Richie hollered back, Vinny who? And that name's been there ever since. He's a 6-time Seekonk Speedway track champion, 73 as the B Division champion, and only his second year of driving. Then in 1990, 92, 93, 2004, 2005, Pro Stock champion. In 2004, when winning his 5th title, then under the NASCAR banner, he was also honored at Nashville for finishing 7th in regional points. In 2005, when winning his 6th title, again under the NASCAR banner, he was once again honored at Nashville for finishing 6th in regional points. He was Seekonk Speedway's first 5-time Pro Stock champion. Quite an accomplishment for a guy I first met running around that speedway with his purple sneakers. Vinny's first career modified win came on June 23rd, 2007, during a Seekonk Speedway event, VMRS event. He would go on to win 2 more VRMS events, October 7th, 2007 and June 14th, 2008. In 2008, he also received the prestigious VMRS Bob Polvereri Award for professionalism on and off the speedway. August 29, 2007 brought about another great achievement when he won the open wheel Wednesday $10,000 to win modified race at Seekonk. Vinny also made 1 start in the NEBA lights there at Seekonk. His 46 career wins at Seekonk will surely make him go down as one of the more successful drivers to make left turns at the Cement Palace. Adding to his credit, in 2018, he was inducted to the Seekonk Speedway Wall of Fame, an award so truly deserved for all his years racing, supporting, and representing the track he considers home in a highly professional manner. Besides his family and friends, one of his most avid fans was the late First Lady of Seekonk Speedway, Irene Vendetti, one of her favorite drivers, and there are many pictures of her standing in victory lane with him. A lot of Vinny's success was made possible by a couple of great sponsors through the years, Pondview Construction and Levex Tree Service. Their support over the years was instrumental in making this all possible for Vinny. I asked Vinny, we sat down and talked about what his proudest moments in racing were. Not surprising to me at all, it was not about his accomplishments at all. His proudest moments in racing were watching his son Todd win in every division he raced in. He won in a truck series, the Pro Stock series, and a modified series, where he also earned his biggest payday, the open wheel Wednesday $10,000 win show. Very special, as both father and son have won that major event, making him a very proud father. Now, let's talk about Vinny the entrepreneur. For some reason, Vinny always believed race tires were harder than they should be. He always felt that they should be more like a marshmallow than a hockey puck. I like to make the analogy of Vinny and Tropicana. You see, they both make juices. Tropicana, as we know, makes orange juice for human consumption. Vinny, as you might know, or some might not know, he makes who juice for tire consumption. Now, Tropicana's job was pretty easy. They come up with a recipe and they stuck with it. Vinny, on the other hand, had to constantly keep changing his recipe to avoid detection. Believe me, that guy could make most anything work on tires. My only concern was some nights we sit there, either in tech line after the races or in victory lane, hoping that those tires wouldn't just kind of melt off the rims. Kind of like a Hershey bar or a hot stove or something. Yeah. He's a racer's racer for sure. But in closing, I'd like to say, and I believe I speak for most of the drivers that race with him, no one will run you harder or cleaner than he will. And as I look at our sport today, I think we need more Vinnies. So at this time, I'd like to welcome my friend, teammate, and this year's inductee to the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame, Vinny Anarumo.
Well, first of all, I don't know what he was talking about. But I'd like to thank everybody that voted me in. This was definitely a big honor. Wasn't expecting it. I want to congratulate everybody else that got in. My crew worked on my cars all the time, 6 nights a week. You listen to people complain about how come this guy wins all the time? Because that guy's in the garage 6 nights a week working on a car. I thank my family, my son, my wife, all the friends that work for nothing, especially Pondview Excavating. Him and Levex Tree Service, they treated me really good. They didn't give me millions of dollars, but they gave me enough to go from week to week. And that's all you can ask for. During racing, I probably made a few people mad at me. And that's the way it goes, I guess. But I made a lot of friends, and I hope I got a lot of friends here. And I'm going to make it short, because Eddie took it all up. Thank you.
He talks as fast as he drove. Our next presenter is one of the great voices in New England motorsports. He's exciting, and he is informative and knowledgeable. And if you go to Seacon and you look on the booth and you see a cowboy hat, you know that night you're going to be treated to pure professionalism. Kevin Boucher.
As I begin, I want to ask everybody to take a minute and think back to the moment that you fell in love with the sport of auto racing. For some, it's difficult because it may have been several days or several moments strung together. For Wayne, it was real easy. Walked into Seekonk Speedway for the first time with his dad, and there was, on the track, the Woodpecker Special, the black and gold number 20 driven by George Summers. Well, throughout the night he went, found a picture at the photo booth, and had George sign it for him. Photo which he says he still has today somewhere up in his attic. The sounds, the sights, the smells all helped, but it was that Woodpecker Special that got him. Being from Warwick, it wasn't hard for him to get into racing. There was plenty of teams around, and as we are still today, everybody was looking for help. Whether it was the Manfredos, the Marfios, the Rosses, the Tylers, or many more teams, it was easy to find a way. From there, Wayne wanted to drive. And the first time he got behind the wheel, he told me, at a practice lap, he thought he set the world on fire. When he came in, he learned that he had not. But it wasn't long before he started wheeling around in his own ride, racing to the front and winning races. What a year for Wayne to be inducted into the Near Hall of Fame. Racing against Vinny Anarumo for many years at Seekonk, a couple of championships with Brad LaFontaine, and a bachelor party emceed by Mike Joy. Not bad company to be in around. Over Wayne's career, he picked up 5 championships, 2 at Seekonk, 2 at Thompson, and 1 at Stafford.
between several different divisions, the street stocks, the late models, the pro stocks, and the SK modifieds. He had a knack behind the wheel, but he wasn't aggressive. He was a methodical driver. Wait for the time to come and make his move. And sometimes a new pair of sneakers wouldn't hurt. He was a quick learner at the track, quickly becoming one of the top drivers, and fortunate enough to have some of the best car owners around. Ray Manfredo, Manny Dias, Ernie Boucher, Brad LaFontaine were among them, along with Rolly Lindblad, Art Barry, and many more. He picked up a few nicknames over the years, too. There was the Super Kid, there was Neon Wayne Dion towards the end of his career, and a trip out to Rockford, Illinois when his identity was stolen, from what I'm told. It was a driver walking around, and every time he asked him who he was, he'd say, "I'm Wayne Dion." So Wayne did just the right thing. He took that other driver's name and went around being known as Dick Trickle. While out in Rockford, he had the unfortunateness of doing something that not many, if not anybody, had done previously. He took a cover that was on the a Stock Car Racing magazine and rolled it over on the backstretch 2 days later. In the wake of, in the likes of Mark Martin, Dick Trickle, Joe Shear, and a lot of the other Midwest stars, the most popular driver at that time was Wayne Dion. Well, in the November recap, there were pictures of that car in mangled sight as after he barrel rolled it. And, well, Wayne started what we now know as the Madden curse. I've heard stories about that trip. I wasn't there, I was too young. But there are about 3 men in this room who lived that trip. And some of the stories that I have heard, we can't repeat. I was 10 when I met Wayne. I was that little kid, short, pain in the neck, car owner's kid. And most of the reason I grew this much was because Wayne stretched my neck and I had to grow into it. A lot of times at the garage or at the track, I'd get in the way and he'd just try to get me out of the way. When Wayne started driving for my father, with him he brought Dan Smith, his best friend and his crew chief. Throughout the years with my father, with Brad, with whomever Wayne went to, Dan was part of that team. But Wayne's team was never Dan. It was Dan and anybody else who came along the way. Because when you got with Wayne, you became a friend for life. The teams that he grew with everybody around him, not just with him. He was a popular driver wherever he competed, whether it was Seekonk, Thompson, Stafford, or even going up to Oxford Plains or Hudson and competing. The fans all knew who he was, and the drivers knew to look out for him as a top competitor. A few years ago, I was fortunate enough to induct Wayne into the Seekonk Speedway Wall of Fame. Before I get to this, Wayne, I do have another honor. The City of Warwick with a proclamation for you today to go along with your induction into the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, Wayne Dion.
I wrote a speech this morning at 5 o'clock, and I don't think I'm going to be able to read it because it's a mess. But I'd just like to say that when I started off, like Kevin was saying, my dad took me when I was about 9 years old, and I saw the Georgie Summers. I just fell in love with racing, and I couldn't get enough of it. I started working on race cars when I was 13 years old, and we had some of the greatest drivers around, Bobby Sprague, Freddie Estelle, and the kid from Fitchburg, Mass., Ronnie Bouchard. And after that, I had no intentions whatsoever of wanting to be a driver. I just figured someday I'd keep working on cars and maybe I'd be a car owner. Then the time came, I was 24 years old, and somebody talked me into building a street stock. That was probably the greatest time I ever had. We missed 2 or 3 weeks of building the car. Season had already started, and we ended up winning 5 races and the championship. So that was the start of my career. Then we moved on, moving up the ranks. I went right from street stocks. Georgie Summers convinced Anthony Vendetti to let me run a modified, from street stocks to modifieds. Way too much to accomplish at having a little baby and making $50 a week to spend. So I figured that was it. But as time went on, I got better rides, championships. Ernie Boucher, I just want to thank him for helping us so much. Great cars, great team. We went on to leave Seacon and run a modified at Thompson Stafford. Won a lot of races, had a lot of fun. Then Brad LaFontaine, excuse me. Then I ended up driving for Brad, again, winning a lot of races. I want to thank Brad. He's the only owner that I've ever driven for that fired me twice. Yep, not once, but twice. And we're still friends. So I just want to thank everybody for being here, all my friends. Very nervous, never nervous when I was driving race cars, but I just had a great time. I ended up starting my own race team in 91, I believe it was, and that was probably the best time I ever had. After Brad and I, we parted, that's when I decided to start my own team, and it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. A bunch of great guys, bunch of misfits, and we just went on, we worked hard, won, I don't know, we won so many races in 1 year that they started changing rules around just so we couldn't win anymore, but that's neither here nor there. But just, we had a great time, we loved it, and to this day, it's best thing that ever happened to me. One more thing. Anybody that's ever been successful in racing, and you decide to retire, and you want to take up golf, just remember one thing. You'll have good days, you'll have bad days, a lot of them, and then you'll have that one day you'll say to your friend, I would rather hit a wall at 100 miles an hour to play this sucky game.
And Wayne, I guess it's okay to be fired 2 times, just as long as he hired you back 3 times. Our next presenter started his passion for racing not too far from him, not too far from here. He was a member of the class of 1960 at Manchester High School, where he spent more time at the local garage than he did in the classroom. But how did he do? Great publisher, great driver, great announcer. He has done it all. There are almost 3 Dick Berggrens. We're going to meet one of them today. Dick Berggren.
You always know a heads-up show when you get to the microphone and there's a spare battery right there. Well done, whoever thought of that. 82-year-old Jack Doyle is one of the most significant figures in the history of New England Dragway. He played a key role in the development of the sport and the creation of the dragway, the construction of which he oversaw. He was the guy on the ground pointing at the bulldozers when they were trying to figure out where they should have been pushing dirt. Doyle served as New England Dragway's general manager from its beginning in 1965 until 1976. He built and he drove successful drag cars. A profoundly modest man, Jack seems to be incapable of pronouncing a simple word, I. It's always we when it's Jack. As a young man, Doyle joined 2 Lynn-based hot rod clubs, the Road Aces and the High Winders, while attending St. John's Prep School in Danvers, Mass. Car clubs were the foundation for the creation, development, and popularization of drag racing. Here in New England, car club members, including Doyle, formed the New England Hot Rod Council, whose purpose was the coordination and helping to grow the hot rod movement. One of the council's most significant accomplishments, however, was the creation of organized drag racing events at the Sanford, Maine Regional Airport. The Sanford Strip had to be kept as an airport, so Doyle and the other racers would set it all up, and then they'd race it, and then they had to take it all down at the end of the racing. Even the guardrails were removed after every event. A permanent facility, it was clear, was needed. Step up, Jack Doyle. He looked for land all over New England and for the funding to build a strip. And it takes a lot of land to run a drag strip, so some of New England Dragway was built in Epping, New Hampshire, while the rest of it wound up in Brentwood, New Hampshire. Building their own drag strip was an enormous undertaking for guys who knew much more about connecting rods than laying asphalt, but they got the job done. And as daunting as building that racetrack was to keep it going for the longer haul. In part due to Doyle's diligence and his guidance, New England Dragway is healthy today. It is the only remaining club-built drag strip in America. It's also New England's busiest racetrack. They start their season in the early spring. They're still going on. They got a swap meet going on there today, and during the summer it runs 3 nights a week. New England Dragway is owned by stockholders. Doyle was among the very first people to reach in his wallet and put his money on the line and buy shares of that track. More than 50 years later, after just two modest dividends, he still owns his shares. I don't think he's going to sell them ever. In his youth, Doyle raced jalopy cars on the local quarter-mile oval before transitioning to drag racing. Built his first drag race car in 1953. It was a 1942 Plymouth powered by a V8 Oldsmobile engine. I bet that was a fine piece, Jack. He soon built his first real dragster, a piece with a Vespa body, tubular chassis, and a Chrysler engine. He built so many cars. Few records of that early racing exist, but it's safe to say that Doyle's cars won plenty of the matches that they were in. He took his cars on the road, winning top gas class at the AHRA Nationals in New York in 1968. He raced the NHRA U.S. Nationals in Indy, the World Series of Drag Racing in Illinois and Michigan. And with Don Roberts as his driver, the team won roughly 80% of the races in which they competed, setting speed and ET records along the way. But with the enormity of building and running New England Dragway in front of him, Jack Doyle gave up building cars and owning them to focus on running the racetrack. Many, including me, consider Jack Doyle to be the father of New England drag racing. In 2015, he was presented with the NHRA Museum Directors Award for Lifetime Achievement in the sport. His awards also include the Oriental's Hot Rod Club Hall of Fame, the Hot Rod Reunion Hall of Fame in 2008, and induction into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame in Gainesville, Florida on March 17, 2017, the sport's highest honor. Last year, he was presented with one of NEAR's highest honors, the Murata Award for his contributions to racing. Jack Doyle is a man of vision who has successfully done everything racing. He built cars, he drove them, he was a major player building New England Dragway, and he ran the place. He serves on the board of directors of the Northeast Motorsports Museum, and he continues to give of himself to further racing in New England. And you all noticed where he parked his van, right out front, so you could all see that drag racing is alive and well here. Today, Jack becomes only the second personality from drag racing to be inducted into the NEAR Hall of Fame. Jack, we are so proud of you.
Dick is going to watch close now. I've been told I have 5 minutes. And let's go as quick as I can and be disjointed. You can figure it out as you go along and think about it later. When we was kids had monkey bars at the gyms and at the playgrounds, instead of swinging on those, I had a chain fall hooked up to it and was pulling an engine out of a car, because I hadn't even discovered women at that time. And the part of the drag strip is not overly modest, but because of staying with it, when we ran Sanford, we actually paid to get in, and then if you stayed around at the end of the event and helped clean everything up, you'd get your money back. So obviously that shows kind of stupid rather than smart. And among the places the dragway could have been is where the Budweiser plant is now, and where the Revere Airport used to be, and et cetera, et cetera. And we finally picked on where we are now. And getting the Murata Award last year was very nice because, of course, Frank Murata was someone that I knew. What else? I saw a lot of Rhode Island people here today, and I got a little corner pocket group of people from Rhode Island here in case I was not welcomed enough. And I've been very welcome at the new museum, and we're looking forward to running some vintage cars up there this year. And again, with the drag racing stuff now running in the 330s at the 1,000-foot length, we'll use a super modified as a starter for them. That didn't go over too good, but I didn't think it would. That's why I said it. And when we had our Legends meeting a few weeks ago and listening to Bentley Warren and so forth, and the other gentleman with him, and the late Ollie Silver was represented by Dick Batchelder. That was interesting. And then remembering hearing that Mr. Silver once time got out and punched Don McLaren at a track. And I thought, well, let's see now. We're not classy enough for sports car racing, and there's too much fighting at the circle track, so I guess I'll stay with the drag strip. And it's proved to be a wise decision. Where we are just closed now, we do literally run anything. There's a little motocross track out back. 2020 season is being worked on now. Town-wise, we run from April 1st to October 30th. And as you can tell, it's still a great ride, and we're still looking forward to it. In this case, my former associates are still with us for the most part. When we were kids laying the deal out, if you wanted to sell your stock in the place, you had to sell it back to the company. You couldn't sell it to the general public. So we were smart enough to be not as dumb as we all looked at the time. And everything that's going on, nobody's given me the hook yet, so I'll keep going. We really enjoy it. We're all in the same, I use the term the same church, we're just in different pews. And of course I knew Charlie Elliott very well. Both tracks were being built about the same time, and if I'd throw it away, Charlie would use it. And they used to stop their racing so they could watch our fireworks show for nothing. I thought that we should have billed them for that. And then, of course, the Weber family took over after that, and hopefully that will continue on into the next generation as well. And I'm glad to see some of them there today as well. And it's just been a great ride. I have actively raced at West Peabody and the Pines and probably Medford Bowl. And I hung around Frank Litwin, whose name don't ever seem to come up around with his dynamite specials. And the Labonte family from Lynn, and Trigger Watson and Beverly and Long East Garage. And as a kid, I hung out around those places, learning as I went along. But I just seemed to stay with the drag racing. Oh, of course, now it's a big deal. We're fighting for sponsors for next year. And one of the things we do that the circle tracks don't seem to is the NASCAR wants to keep everybody out of the pits, and you have to do that, and we go the other way, and everybody's welcome in the pits, even though it's a nuisance and a pain in the neck and all that sort of thing. And the autograph sessions that some of our drivers aren't too keen on it, but they're glad to do it because it's part of the deal. And then we have one big edge going with we can start junior dragsters, little small cars, as young as 5 now. And seeing some of the little boys and girls with their little racing suits and everything, it's really cute. Out of them making me feel like I want to sit in a wheelchair when I see them. But we also, of course, have the ulterior motive of hopefully some of them will keep into it. And the media's all changed now. It's social this, social that, Twitter this, Twitter that. And the old days of buy a bunch of ads on radio in Boston, open the door, and in come the crowd. That don't happen anymore. And we ran, what we run this year, them Street Outlaws group that will be coming back next year. There's a couple of import cars that have a twin turbocharged Honda. Well, that's not my big cup of tea, but he's a customer and he's at the place and he bought a tonic and a hot dog and away we go. So that they will still let me come to the museum, I think now. I don't think I would say anything bad about it. Dick is going to continue to be his role as major fundraiser, so watch yourself if Dick gets close to you. The more you have, the harder he'll work at getting a piece for our museum. And we're glad to name the new section at the left-hand end of it in whatever name comes up with the most money. True, but not too smooth in talking. I guess my 5 minutes is almost over. I usually always, of course, forget my wife and family who have put up with all this sort of thing for over the years, and I just take them for granted that it was, you're nice and polite, but I waited for my own wedding for after till the season closed, and then scheduled it then, like you were scheduling a race. And that's, but luckily the lady was nice enough to go along with it. And let's see, I was not at Woodstock, New York, because I was on Long Island at an AHRA drag racing thing instead of Woodstock. So that kind of, shows where I'm coming from. And I can't think of too much more because of where I'm outnumbered here, about 300 to 1. I don't want to wear out my welcome, and I'll try to come back next year and be a good member of your association, and just keep it going and get, again, youth, 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 and more youth, so that they will have the memories that you people have now. And I thank you very much for this honor, and I'll be glad to display it at the museum. Of course, you have to buy a ticket and come in to see it, because we're a little shady that way. But if you haven't got it, I'll bring it out and show it to you in the parking lot. Thank you all very much for this honor. God bless you all, and thank the veterans for tomorrow.
Nobody can use words better than he can. He's wrote books about the heroes: Bugsy, Eddie, Richie, Parnelli Jones. But I think his best writing is when he writes about his romance with motorsports that started at the short tracks like Plainville Stadium. And nobody captures that atmosphere better than our next presenter, Bones Boussier.
Thank you, Matt. I've always had a soft spot for the people that you might call the lifers in this sport. Those who attack racing as not only a passion, but a profession. It's not the easiest way to pay the bills, and it never has been. But it's a special thing to discover early on exactly what you want to pursue. And what an amazing gift when it turns out that you're really good at it. Our next inductee, Ed Flemke Jr., is one of those gifted lifers. When it comes to racing, Eddie is all in. He was born into it, of course. His father, Steady Eddie Flemke, was another lifer, and surely one of the greatest drivers New England has ever produced. When this Hall of Fame became a reality in 1998, the elder Flemke was a charter inductee, and it was Eddie Jr. who gave the acceptance speech on behalf of his dad, whom we all remember so fondly. Actually, we've all been calling this guy by the wrong name for years. Technically, Eddie Jr. isn't a junior at all because he and his father had different middle names. But when you grow up in the paternal shadow cast by one of the all-time greats, and you share the same first and last names, you are destined to be called Junior forever. That's just the way it goes. It's a lot to live up to, yes, but it's also a name that today's inductee has carried with pride. This Eddie has been a little bit of everything. Many of us saw him first as a young driver of a modified coupe. Then came a short hiatus from driving while he turned wrenches in the last few seasons of his dad's career. When the younger Flemke returned to the cockpit, he raced successfully for the next 25 years. And for more than half his life, he's been designing and building race cars, quietly becoming arguably New England's most prolific modified constructor. It has been a terrific body of work made up of all these distinct phases. And to give Eddie his due, it's necessary to briefly reflect on each phase. Eddie Jr.'s driving debut came at Riverside Park in 1973, just shy of his 18th birthday. This was not the kind of silver spoon situation you see these days with some teenage racers. No, this kid started in a second-hand or maybe third-hand coupe with very little money and only the bare minimum of advice from Dad. Steady Eddie wanted the boy to learn the old school way, by trial and error. At season's end, Eddie Jr. was Riverside's Rookie of the Year. One coupe led to another, and then came a nice Capri-bodied modified, and in 1977, a really trick number 11 Plymouth Arrow that looked fast just sitting in the pits. In hindsight, it was that car that offered an early glimpse of this guy's fabricating skills. Its sister car, similar in design, built by he and his father, ended up as a low, sleek maroon and white Pinto, the Manchester Sand and Gravel number 10. That Pinto was a big part of Eddie Jr.'s story. See, it was in this period that a little at a time he put his own racing career on hold. It was an instinctive, selfless act, a son wanting to help his father. And in September of that 1977 season, when Steady Eddie and that maroon and white Pinto won both Stafford's Labor Day 200 and the Thompson 300, right beside him in victory lane stood one very proud son. No one in those days cared about lofty titles like crew chief or chief mechanic, but either one would have fit the role Eddie Jr. was playing. And consider this, those two victories in a 3-week period would have been a high water career mark for most mechanics. In Eddie Jr.'s case, that accomplishment is overlooked, almost overlooked. It represents just a small piece in that larger body of work. Life, I suppose, is like the oval tracks we all love. Things tend to circle around. And in the mid-'80s, Eddie got back behind the wheel and his driving career really began to gel. On the NASCAR Modified Tour, Flemke Jr. won 17 times at 11 different tracks, set fast time on at least 16 occasions, and started a record 382 consecutive Tour events. Although never a Tour champion, he was twice a runner-up in the standings, in 2004 to Tony Hirschman, and in 2006 to Mike Stefanik. In 2002, he was voted NASCAR's most popular modified driver. There are many more feature wins on his resume, some in the SK Modifieds at Stafford, Thompson, and Waterford, and others in modified action at Riverside Park and various open competition events. And there's a handful of victories that I believe would have made his dad smile. Remember, Steady Eddie was the founding father of the Eastern Bandits, that legendary traveling gang, including Denny Zimmerman, who's here today, that in the early 60s hauled lots of trophies home from tracks south of the Mason-Dixon line. Well, Eddie Jr. has been a winner at the Motor Mile Speedway in Virginia, at North Carolina's Caraway Speedway, and at Anderson Motor Speedway in South Carolina. And much farther down I-95, in the annual World Series at New Smyrna, Florida, he beat Ted Christopher and George Kent to win a hard-fought 50-lapper. As earlier, the original Ed Flemke cast a very long shadow, but make no mistake, his son drove out of it and staked his own place in the spotlight, putting together a career that a lot of drivers would have envied. Lastly, Eddie has played a major role in 3 different editions of the Raceworks car building business. First in the late 70s and early 80s, working alongside his father, then in the 90s and the 2000s in partnership with Reggie Ruggiero, and for the last several years on his own. The statistics from Raceworks are beyond impressive. Even though each version of Raceworks has been a low-volume operation rather than an assembly line shop, cars that Eddie designed and built have won with at least 71 different drivers and have accounted for track championships at least a dozen speedways. Among the highlights, a Cardinal 500 win at Martinsville with driver Tony Siscone, and a pair of victories in the Race of Champions at Flemington Speedway with Siscone and Billy Pouch. One other thing in connection with his commitment to this sport. Anyone who's ever stood near Eddie at any track, maybe watching a heat race, has seen this. The caution flag waves, and into the pits comes some poor guy's car, maybe with the right front suspension dangling off. The only way that guy's going to make it back out for the restart, or even for the consi, is with a lot of solid mechanical help and lots of hard work. So many times, Eddie has been the first man to reach that guy's pit, whether or not it was a customer of his. That kind of generosity of spirit doesn't get you into the Hall of Fame all by itself, but it's one of 100 things I admire about this guy. So he's been a mechanic, a driver, a car builder. In short, he's a lifer. As of today, he's also a member of the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame. And Eddie, although you joined your dad today as an inductee, this honor is yours alone. One more time, you've made it your own way. You've made your own way into your own spotlight. Come on up here and enjoy it.
Thanks, Bones. Driven 180 miles an hour, reached down, adjust the front rear sway bars, all the while being passed by AJ Foyt at Sebring. Not break a sweat. Put a microphone and some paper in front of me, I want to throw up, I'll just tell you. But bear with me, I'm going to do my best. Okay, I would like to congratulate my fellow honorees on their induction, and I am proud and deeply humbled to be among this great group. I think it's awesome that we worked or raced with most of these year's class that I did. It's truly beyond words for me to even be mentioned among all these members of the Hall of Fame. This has been really hard for me to put into words what this means to me. Ask anyone who's been around me for the last month or so, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Being born into a racing family is an honor of its own, and growing up in one is truly an adventure, especially if you're born into the Flemke family. Being the son of Ed Flemke, you might think I always wanted to be a race car driver growing up, but truth be told, I really didn't. Never really gave it much thought. Now, how I actually started driving wasn't my idea at all. It was my childhood friend, Tony Altieri's idea. Tony and I had been friends from the age of 11 or 12. We hung out and went to the races together for about 5 years or so, and looking back now, neither of us knows whose idea it was, but we just decided we should give racing a try. One day, we were talking about it, and Tony's father overheard us and asked us if we had a car yet, because he had a modified that was about 95% done and sitting in the storage garage, and offered to sell it to us if we were interested. We asked him how much he wanted, figuring we couldn't possibly afford it, and he said, "I'll take $500 for it. Motor, tires, spares, and all. Just get it out of my garage." So we jumped at this offer and bought it without any plans on what we were going to do with it or even how we were going to finish it either. We got to work on it, and with some help from our fathers and friends, managed to finish it up. Seeing the car was originally built for Riverside Park, we decided we should try racing it there. The next step was getting our license. Didn't give much thought. Neither of us hadn't thought that far ahead, but we had to choose an owner, driver, or crew license. So we talked about it for a while, and Tony said, "How about this? My father's always been an owner, and you're the driver. How about I be the owner, and you be the driver? If it doesn't work out, we can switch." So that's what we did. And by the way, I think it turned out to be a pretty good decision. But if you don't agree, blame it on T.A. Tony. After all, it's always the motorman's fault. So off the park we went, both about 17, with little to zero knowledge of what we were doing. Starting off so young and with little knowledge, along with being the son of Ed Flemke, brought some immediate attention of some good and some not so good news. As you could imagine, I had some tough critics, especially at the beginning. I'd like to share with you a paragraph from a weekly racing paper about my first attempt, dated April 19th, 1973, 5 days after my first race. It said, "Saturday evening proved two things to me. One was the fact that there are other manufacturers than Chevy, as Charlie Glazier was the victor in the 50-lap feature at Riverside with a 302 Ford power plant under his coupe. The other was that a name does not a race driver make. Eddie Flemke Jr. was behind the wheel of a 37 coupe at the park, and to be polite, all I will say is that he would much better be wiser to gain experience in a sportsman or street ranks, as he was very definite hazard on the track." Man, what a welcome to the world of racing that was. Come to think of it, this is probably why I've been so tough on the riders over the years. When my father heard about this article, knowing how much it bothered me, he took me aside and said, "Don't let what that guy wrote bother you. You're doing fine. You'll find your success, and when you do, that guy will be long gone and forgotten. Like he did so well and so often, he put things in perspective for you. On On the positive side of being his son, I have been exposed to many, almost too many to count, great and successful people over the years. Each one of them are part of the man standing here today and will always be held close to my heart. Being exposed to these influences made me aware of many things. One of them being, if you want to stand out in this world, you're going to have to be willing to stand up. Stand up for what you believe and what you are trying to accomplish. I'd like to take this opportunity to mention a number of them. Bear with me. Richie and Ray Garuti, Don Moon, John Steiger, Al Lango, Bobby Judkins, Rolly Lindblad, Hop Harrington, Denny Zimmerman, Pete Hamilton, Ray Stonka, Skip Matzak, Bobby V, Bobby Cuneo, Ron Bouchard, Tony Ferrante, and Dick Barney. These individuals gave me the appetite and courage to build my own cars, which led me to build them for a living. Which brings me to my customers that put the hard-earned money and faith in me. I want to thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Looking back over the years, I'm amazed of the successes we've had. Even though we were outnumbered most of the times, we had some amazing times together, and I'm looking forward to more in the future. Speaking of being outnumbered, one year at Martinsville, Bones mentioned, Dick Barney with Tony Cisco and Drivin had the only Raceworks car in the field, prompting someone to call our car Brand X. Later that day, as we were celebrating our win in Victory Lane, Dick Barney said with that great big smile, "How do you think they all feel now, getting their butts kicked by the Brand X car?" That was a great day for sure. To my car owners and team members, Tony Altieri, Dean and Patty Palmer, John Hummel and our guys from Team 11, Ray and Chris of RNC Auto Body, Jim Gallant, Sandra David and Roger Hill, Gary and Pat Tito, Don, Shelley, and Christy King, and the many other owners who have trusted me with their equipment, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed our times together as much as I have. To all the people that have been by my side at the shops from early days of Manchester and East Hartford era, some are even here today, Jet, Doug, the Asklars, the Matigues, the Quattroparties, the Hodges, John McClure, and the Lawlers, and the later Berlin location, the Reg, Jesse, Big Tony, Margaret, George Lombardo, Roger, Big Rick, Bob, Joe, and of course Lucas. Thank you all for keeping me company and all of you on all that you've done for me. 3 special women I would like to mention. Debbie Moss, you all know, my stepmom Carolyn, who is here today with us celebrating, and my sister Paula. There are no words I could put together that describes what you mean to me. My brothers and sisters, Lori, Timmy, Kenny, and Christy, thank you, your love and support, and Chris, for your love and support. And Chris, I'm excited to see what the future holds for us. Thank you all for standing by my side and letting me be me. So hopefully, without getting too emotional, here we go, I would like to share this with you. At the end of last year's induction ceremony, I went to congratulate Mike Stefanik on his induction and promised to him to keep pushing to get him into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. He was very appreciative, and as usual, he turned the attention away from himself and said, "You know, you should be here today too." I said, "Thanks, Mike. I sure hope so. Maybe someday, but today is your day. We can talk about me when it's my day, but today it's yours. Unfortunately, I won't be able to have that conversation. I wish I could, along with the others who are no longer with us, especially my mother and father, my stepdad, Paul Bowen, Pete, Kenny, Jeffrey, Teddy, and Bob Potter. Just a few I wish were still with us, and I miss so much. I'm going to close with a little life lesson story I hold close to my heart that Bones mentioned earlier. The first time I stepped into a race car, my father gave me a bit of advice. I'd like to share that with you, especially the young people here. After 2 quick sessions of maybe 5 or 6 laps, my father walked out to the inner edge of the infield and called me back in. Imagine that happening today. Okay. I pulled in and he walked over and sat on the driver's side nerve bar, reached in, grabbed my left arm, which by the way, told me years later that he did that to get the sense of other drivers' stress level he was racing with. As he held my arm, he said, "I've got to go now." He looked straight at me and said, "Just remember one thing, kid, the only one you have to impress is yourself." He patted me on the arm one more time and walked away. I am proud to say I have used these words many times over the years with many young drivers, most recently with a young lady, Nikki Shambrello. So after 46 years of living and sharing this advice, I think I can finally say, well, Dad, I'm impressed, but I'm not done yet. Thank you once again to the members of NEAR everyone who makes this event possible, and everyone who believed in me. It's truly an honor beyond these words. Thank you.
And Ed was talking about the bad press that he received early in his career, and that only proves one thing. They even had fake news back in 1973. Our next presenter made himself a name as a promoter, but he was best known for his broadcasting. Maybe Chris Economaki invented the role of pit reporter, but Jack Arute perfected it. And he perfected the role of sideline reporter at college football. And everybody who does that job now copies the blueprint that was invented by this guy, Jack Arute.
Before I tell you and introduce to you the next member of the Hall of Fame, I want to reach out to someone I grew up with. Eddie, you maybe were shaken up here and this microphone intimidated the crap out of you, but you knocked it out of the park. When you work in any industry or you follow sports or you talk about coming to the very top of your game, they refer to it as being an icon. In sports, there's a bunch of icons that are identified with particular sports. Vin Scully in baseball, Keith Jackson, oh Nelly in college football. In auto racing, Ken Squire. Icons do more than just work at the top of their game. Icons provide inspiration for folks who want to follow in their footsteps and when they're young, aren't sure if they'll ever be able to do that. So in addition to being at the top of the game, they provide that inspiration. Now for those of us that want to follow in their footsteps, when you're young, you look and think, oh, that may be a little too big of a reach. So you look at regional icons, and that's the case with this next inductee. Like me, the iconic voices of the New England area were Tom Gallen, were Jimmy Power, were of course the one and only Bill Welch. After a period of time, you had to scratch yourself or pinch yourself and say, I'm working with them. And then a little bit of other time proceeds, and you've left, and you've moved on to pursue the next icon. For Mike Joy, the path started at Riverside Park, but it was a path that was paved with passion. He was one of the original storytellers. Mike defined not only New England broadcasting, but when he moved on to Motor Racing Network and then to CBS and to TNT, he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot his roots. And he was quick, with a quip, to remind worldwide audiences of where he came from and what those folks that he covered and aspired to cover when he was at Riverside, at Stafford, at Thompson, at Waterford, putting word pictures to short track aces like Georgie Summers and Bob Palverieri and the Christopher brothers, to remind them that some of the very best racing took place right in the New England states. But along the way, he became associated with the epitome of motorsports broadcasting. You see, Mike Joy climbed that ladder, rung by rung. Never fueled by ego, but fueled by an abiding passion to be the very best at the profession he chose. He has paid us back in many, many ways, but he has also given his peers, the folks on a national level that he has worked with, an abiding appreciation for what we have going here, right in the great state of New England. Some of us, like me, choose to go just so far. I was a pit announcer. I'll always be a pit announcer. I'll let you in on a secret. I did not enjoy when I did play-by-play, but Mike did. And Mike proved very early on he was really, really good at it. Now I want to ask you, just to picture this for just a second. For almost 20 years, Mike Joy was commissioned with the role of being the gatekeeper for Darrell Waltrip. Just imagine that for a second. And in between, they've thrown another cast of characters in there, where it was wild and wacky Jeff Hammond or a Larry McReynolds whose face was buried in the latest stats. But there was always a calming tone. If it was tragedy, Mike Joy was the one that delivered us the message with dignity and class. If it was excitement, Mike Joy was the one that didn't oversell it, but let that excitement just flow over you. I'm proud to be inducting Mike Joy into this Hall of Fame, but I forgot my phone because there's somebody special wanted to send you a message. Give me 1 minute.
In Victory Lane in Daytona in 1989, and so he's been around way before that, and he's certainly been around ever since then. But Mike is like the steadying force. You put Mike Joy in the booth with me and Larry McReynolds like we did back in '01, and you need somebody like him that's got a sense of the business and what works and what doesn't work. And Mike always looking at me and Larry and telling us to let it breathe, and he's just got a real knack, a real TV personality, got that great voice, knowledgeable. There's no one that knows more trivia than Mike Joy, and usually finds a way to use it. And he's a real pro. I believe Ken Squire will always be, our friend and somebody we all love and think a lot of. But Mike Joy is right in the same class with Ken Squire, Barney Hall. All those great voices, all those knowledgeable people, all those people that have dedicated their life to this sport and done a great job of covering it for many, many years, whether it was in the pits or in the booth. I'm a big Mike Joy fan, always have been.
Mike Joy, ladies and gentlemen, an icon. Come on up here.
Do I have to hear it again?
No, I sent it to you in an email so you can take it home.
Thank you, Jack, and thank Darrell for me. And thanks to Near and to all of you associated with the Hall of Fame. This is big. This is such a long time in coming. I'm kind of happy it took so long because the statute of limitations has now run out on a lot of the things we did back then. And I was a little nervous about today because the last time Jack Arute stood up and made a speech for me, I ended up on honeymoon in Bermuda, and he disappeared with a bridesmaid and wasn't seen for 3 days. True story. And with that, why do we need announcers? Well, that was answered before I came to Stafford Motor Speedway. Bill Slater was running the track, and you all knew Bill, and how Bill talked very quickly in a very clipped tone, very clipped voice, and Jimmy Powers was the announcer. And one night at the racetrack, as I heard the story, Powers shows up, and he's a little indisposed. Can't go on the microphone, so Slater goes up to the booth and takes the microphone in hand as the first heat comes to turn 4, and he goes, there's Bugsy Stevens, and there's Freddie DeCero, and there's Leo Cleary, and there's Georgie Summers, and here they come in green flag. Look at them sumbitches go! And realizing what he did probably the first recorded mic drop, and never picked one up again. So they needed people like Wally Saliba, Tom Gallen, Paul Baker, Charlie Crocco, Raleigh Jacobs, of course Ken Squire, our mentor, and Bill Welch. And I owe Bill, when I started there, I knew how to talk. I knew what I was talking about, and I could do it with enthusiasm and passion. I hadn't learned how to listen. And had I listened better, I could have learned so much about what Bill Welch thought were the glory days of auto racing. For me, the glory days were the early and mid-'70s. When we transitioned in the modifieds from straight axle, split spring Flemke front ends to independent suspension. When I started in this sport, the chassis of these cars either came off 57 Chevys, or in the case of this oddball thing, Ali Silva had a Model A Ford, and to tube frame chassis that were sketched out in chalk on the cement floor of a garage and welded together. And by the time I left New England to go down south, we had great store-bought race cars from Maynard Troyer, from Richie Evans, those beautiful cars from Chassis Dynamics. And instead of being painted in the backyard, It was folks like Holmes and Bear doing the cars, Brian Sines, Joe Garrity, Jake Hafke, putting the graphics on them, making them beautiful. So to see all of that develop and to see the sport develop, it really was a magical time. So my thanks to the Carrolls, to the Honigs, to the Aroots for indulging me, because I got to come in on Friday or Saturday night or Sunday afternoon and play on the microphone and do what I had learned from Ken Squire, from Jack Aroot, from Bill Welch. Make these fellas into your heroes. I was so green in 1970 when I started doing this, and I was a fan of Can-Am and Trans Am and Formula One, and my heroes were fellows like Dan Gurney, A.J. Foyt, Parnelli Jones. And I got to Riverside Park, and I thought all these drivers were full-time racers. I didn't realize that Billy Greco was a long-haul trucker, that Bob Pulvereri was building houses and apartment buildings, that Bob Stefanik drove an oil truck, that all of these people had 5-day-a-week big jobs, but then on Saturday nights, they were our heroes. And what they were doing behind the wheel of those cars was magical. Today, I watched a race a couple of weeks ago, Cup race, and these cars are so aerodynamically glued down to the track, it just looks like I-91 traffic at 3 times the speed. But boy, on a fifth mile, quarter mile, half mile track, you see these drivers manhandling these 600 horsepower beasts, bending them to their will, sliding them around the corners. And damn it, that's exciting. And that was a wonderful time to be in this sport. We transitioned from coupe-bodied and coach-bodied cars to Pintos and Vegas and Gremlins. And cars, did we have cars? We had Speedway Scene, thanks to Val Lasur. We had Checkered Flag Announcer, thanks to Paul Tremaine. The millennials in the crowd will not understand how we used to make a toll call to Willimantic, Connecticut to get the news of what happened at the track the night before and listen to a recorded message to find out what happened. That's what we had to do. We had Illustrated Speedway News, National Speed Sport News, a raft of magazines, and now fewer left. There's Area, and there's Speedway Illustrated, and thank you for that, to help chronicle our sport for the next generation to have fun with. It was a golden age. I was reading Speedway Scene from 1973 the other night. 53 modifieds in the pits at Riverside Park. 20 would qualify for the feature event. Just incredible. There was also there was a little racing on the radio. There was this thing called the Rennie Charland Racing Program. Now, how many of you remember Der Champ, 4-time national champ from Agawam? So Rennie found a money-making deal where he'd have a weekly radio show, and the only problem with that was the show was in Springfield, Mass, and Rennie was spending his Saturday nights racing at Fonda, New York. So he called me up to help with the radio show. So I go over to this little studio, and Rennie's telling everybody how Lou Lazzaro did him wrong at Fonda, that dirty, no-good Lou Lazzaro, the monk, you know. And his throw to commercial was epic. He'd say, now we got to go pay for some of this here show. And they'd run a commercial. So finally it came time. He goes, oh, you know, at Claremont, you know, up there, what's his name, Punky Karen won to race, and up at Mana, it don't matter, they got rained out. And that was how Rennie did the show. So I'm going to tell you everything happened at Riverside. So I've got my notes of who ran where in the heats and the feature, and I'm going through this, and I'm really reading it, going, and I go to reach to turn the page, and he has lit my notes on fire with his cigar. And I didn't even notice. But it's all the fun we could have, you know, it really was. The transition, well, let's see. Stafford. You know, it always bugged me at Riverside and at Stafford and at Thompson that the novelty acts drew more people than the really good modified racing. You could pack the place for Demolition Derby, 3,000 people would show up to see the greatest show on earth when the modifieds had run. Well, at Stafford we didn't have Demolition Derby because Jackie's dad did not want the track torn up by those junkers. But we had specialty acts. We booked a guy named Rex Blackwell, a motorcyclist, and he was going to jump a spinning helicopter on the front straightaway. Until the DMV intervened and thought that was not a very good idea. Nobody wanted to see him jump a non-spinning helicopter, so that was that. We had a guy called Jimmy Crash Moreau, the Maine Maniac. And Jimmy's act was he did a ramp-to-ramp jump over a bunch of school buses. You've seen this stuff on Wide World of Sports and maybe at some of your local tracks. Well, the trouble with Jimmy Moreau was when he was looking straight at you, he was also seeing Rick Fuller over here with his other eye. Things didn't quite work so well for poor Moreau. So he gets the ramps all lined up and everything's measured out to the inch, and he gets in the car and he starts making laps, and he comes and he pulls right up next to Peter Locke with the pace car. He says, "The speedometer doesn't work." He says, "I have to be going exactly 45 miles an hour or I miss the ramp. Will you pace me around the track?" So Peter paced him side by side, 45 miles an hour, 2 laps. Here goes Jimmy Moreau, and the car goes up the ramp and then clears the ramp. Comes down on the school buses. Here comes the ambulance, comes running over, and Moreau crawls out of the car. I'm standing there trackside, Jack's up in the booth. He wants the microphone. Oh, I mean, he's got a broken leg. He's got bones sticking out of his leg, but he wants to talk to the crowd, and he tells them, "I'm going to come back. I'm going to make this jump. I'm going to come back." People went crazy. So next year, what do? We booked him again. The place is packed. Almost a Spring Sizzler size crowd. And same song, second verse. He goes up with the car and he goes off the ramp and he comes down. The left wheels come down on the right ramp. The ramp crashes the car goes rolling into the guardrail. You know, same thing. Here comes the ambulance. The fans are going crazy. This is the greatest thing they've ever seen. They cart him. He tells them, "I'll be back." They cart him off to the hospital again. Next year, we got to bring him back, right? He's got his act together. The car takes off. It sails off the ramp. It does a perfect 4-point landing on the other ramp, spins to a stop. He jumps out of the car. Ta-da! And people are throwing things at him, booing. Nobody came to see him make it. Yeah, special events. Crash Moreau. I got to thank a couple of people here, and I'm not going to tell you 50 years worth of stories, I promise. I need to thank people who loaned me their race cars against their better judgment, so I could see what going half fast was like. Dick Goulet, Bob Pulvereri, Marty Radwick, Steve Avanchin, Jeff Fuller, Kenny Epsman. I drive his cars now in historic Trans Am, and just have a ball doing it. My brother David and his wife Barbara, he's the head of the Board of Education here in South Windsor. My sister Susan and her husband Bruce, and my sister Carrie and her husband Bobby. My wife of 22 years would love to be here. She's recovering from hip surgery and can't put any weight on that leg, so she's at home. And thank you, Gabe. And my kids, of whom I am most proud. Katie is a sophomore at Belmont in Nashville. She's in the Mike Curb School of Music Business. She's going to be a concert promoter. Loves the music business. My son Scott is a junior at Northeastern. He is studying finance and entrepreneurship. He grew up wanting to be Jimmy Johnson and race Bandoleros and Legends cars, and we bought a lot of bumpers. Got a win and a flip at Waterford. One made his mom very happy, the other not so. You never want to call home and your first words are, "Scott's okay, but..." Now he wants to be Roger Penske. I think that's a great career path. Hell, I'd like to be Roger Penske. Who wouldn't? Celebrate your 82nd birthday by buying a racetrack, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That guy is my hero. Absolutely. So apologies to Scott and Caitlin for all those times I had to tell them work comes first. But they have turned out great, and I am so proud of them. Bones Bercier, thank you for your efforts making all this necessary today. And Dick Berggren, my longest running and best friend on pit road and in the TV business. It's just It's been an honor. The first time we got together was 1972, the Thompson Challenge Cup Classic, where we shared the microphone at Thompson Speedway, did the PA. I learned a lot from him until about 2 o'clock in the morning when I realized we were in Boston in the combat zone. And ended up at 5 o'clock in the morning desecrating Kathy's kitchen, cooking lobster, because it seemed like the thing to do. Don Barrio and Dick and I, and that's when I decided, wow, I really want to be part of this. This is a lot of fun. And it has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Don't ever want it to end. Somebody added up the other day that between radio and television, I've called 40 Daytona 500s. And more to come. My sideline, it's my sideline, it's John's living. New England Racing Fuel and my partners, Charlie and Barbara and John and Diane Holland, couldn't ask for better partners and better friends. When Al Feeney first came to us about supporting the mobile Nerf Hall of Fame, when it was first constituted, we were all in, and that's been a thrill ride too. I didn't do this alone. I had great mentors. Ken Squire, as we've all spoken of, Barney Hall, Ned Jarrett. They were my role models, my mentors, and I owe so much to them. The last thing I have is about the photo for the wall. They said, we need an action photo. I go, well,
Pretty good.
well, with my mouth open. I guess that's an action for a broadcaster. That's an action photo. The first photo, the headshot, was taken only 19 years ago. That's what 19 years of boogity, boogity, boogity will do to you between then and now. But Daryl and Larry and Jeff Gordon have been just a treat to work with. Fox gives us all the resources we need to try to make heroes out of these drivers. We're back to that again, and bring it all home for all of you. And that's what we try to do every Sunday. The other photo, so the action photo, I have pictures of me in Victory Lane with people that are my friends and people that are very important and idols to me. Billy Greco, Bob Pulverary, a lot of people, longtime folks. But I chose this particularly because it was one of the first nights that I worked at Stafford, and I was in Victory Lane, and as usual, Bug Stevens had won the race. And with Bill Slater and Ed Yarrington looking on, I'm asking Bugsy a question, and it's a real thoughtful pose that Bugsy has there. And so I guess it must have been a good question, was all I could think of. But as was said at the top of the day, there was Bugsy Stevens and there was everybody else. So I thought, if I'm going to share this photo with somebody, got to be the Bugman, and I'm proud of that. I want to thank all of you and congratulate all of this year's honorees. And let me answer the question I posed at the start of this. Why do you need an announcer? It's not to tell you who's in the cars. It's not to read those endless sponsor promos or remind you what's coming up next. The number one job of every announcer at every track has always been make the fan invest in their heroes and make them walk out of there being damn certain they're going to be right back in that seat next Saturday night. And that's what I've tried to do. Thank you so much.
We do have a news bulletin. Already inducted into next year's Hall of Fame class, Crash Moreau. Now, just a story about the legend of Mike Joy. And I don't even know if this is true, but during his early days at Riverside, they said that he used to go, before anybody was at the track, go in the booth and practice announcing with nothing going on in the track, just to warm up his voice the way you would warm up a car. So I always wanted to be like Mike Joy, so I decided to try the same thing. Unfortunately, it was this year at the Waterford Speed Bowl. We have a driver's change. Pinch hitting for Valasor, who is unable to join us today. We have the president ready to make a presentation, Rich Goucher.
Well, this is a little difficult. It's my first banquet, and it's also my first presentation. And these guys put me up after Jack Arute and Mike Joy. Thank you very much for that. Interesting thing about Mike Joy and the kind of guy he is. Years and years ago, I was coming back from Martinsville, Virginia, and I was on the same plane. And we're getting baggage. Me and my wife are getting baggage, and he's getting his stuff, and he's in a hurry. But my wife was so enamored with, oh, it's Mike Joy, oh, it's Mike Joy. This guy doesn't know us from Adam and took the time to talk to us, and that meant the world to my wife. So, Mike, thank you very much. The gentleman I'm entrusted with enshrining into this organization today, into the Hall of Fame, has a heck of a resume. He's a legend to me as far as a car builder and as far as a car owner. He started off at the Seekonk Speedway building and owning cars and garnering championships. It was pretty easy because he was from Rhode Island, and to talk to him, you can't tell he's from Rhode Island. While operating his auto salvage yard, he embarked in a career in racing that has spanned well over 50 years. In 1992, he started his race car fabrication and parts business, Northeast Race Cars and Parts. He grew that into the biggest of its kind in the Northeast. His shop has pumped out countless winning chassis for just about every class of racing in New England. His parts truck is a fixture at absolutely every raceway that he goes to, at racetracks throughout the area. The knowledge, know-how, and advice that comes for free with every sale to each aspiring racer is priceless. Now this man is ready to turn over the reins of the business to a trusted friend at 65, so he can spend more time with his family and pursuing other interests. Brad LaFontaine is a man of many, many talents. It's so fitting that he's enshrined in the Hall of Fame as he steps back to reflect a bit on his accomplishments. Brad was pretty close to unbeatable as a crew chief and a car owner. When I first started to know him, he was owning and wrenching the gray number 66 at Thompson for many drivers like Ted Christopher, Wayne Dion, who we honored today. And he won many Thompson championships, won at Stafford, and that opened up new opportunities for him. Other people realized that Brad knew what he was doing. It was kind of obvious. Perhaps the finest years were when Jeff Fuller and the Scott and Patty Banzold, Sunoco number 8, and Sheba Racing. Those were his biggest years. He had 61 starts. They scored 17 wins, 34 top 5s, 42 top 10 finishes. The team won the 1992 NASCAR Modified Tour Championship. To me, the biggest thing about those accomplishments were that in 3 years the team had 10 DNFs. All were due to engine malfunction or crashes. Brad's cars never broke. Trust me, our teams and every other team were praying that they would. Brad would go racing for a few years and he'd take time off to run his business and pay attention to other things. And then all of a sudden, he'd turn back up again. Every time, it was like he never left. Brad came back again with Eddie Whalen to field cars for Mike Iwanitzko, Jeff Fuller, and champion Ted Christopher. A second National Modified Tour Championship came in 2008 with the Brad and Ted combination. Brad came back yet again with Chris Orr to field cars with Tommy Barrett, Mike Stefanik. This team won at New Hampshire, Bristol, Seekonk, and Star. Brad's teams have won at every facility on the Eastern Seaboard. He's won with a small army of drivers with very diverse driving styles. He's built cars and supplied parts for hundreds of other success stories across New England. All in all, Brad LaFontaine is the epitome of a very deserving Hall of Fame inductee. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody's friend, Brad LaFontaine.
Could you pass me one up? It's always worked the best. Takes the pressure off. You know, Wayne talks about how I fired him twice, but he doesn't talk about how when I called him to drive my car, he made me go to a restaurant in his neighborhood with his crew, and they drilled me to find out if I knew what I was doing. How do you put wedge in a car, he says. I'm thinking, really? You know, it's like, so he talks about me firing him, but he doesn't talk about how he drilled me to death too. We had a good relationship. I wanna say that we had a great relationship. Time's just flying by, and needless to say, when I got inducted into the Hall of Fame, everybody started calling me and telling me, "Oh, well, you're getting old now." And it's like, what? You don't think I know my age? You know, it's like everybody's telling you that, and it's one of the things that's going to happen to all of us here. And you know, it's just an honor to be inducted into this Hall of Fame. One of the things as a crew chief, I feel like I've accomplished everything that I've wanted to accomplish. And that's why in 2015, when Chris Auer was getting out, I decided to get out myself. It was kind of perfect timing. He wanted to leave me everything he had, his trailers, his race cars, his motors, everything, along with all his sponsors that he had, and he had great sponsors. And I told him that I would be glad to help him sell everything because it just wasn't in my cards at that time in 2015. So that's when I really started to back out of it a little bit. And of course, Northeast Race Cars always kept me going. I was still able to hang out with all the racing people, which I love. Most of you guys are my friends, and if you're not my friend, I want you to be. But that's one of the things that Northeast Race Cars kept me involved in, was being able to build cars for people. If your car won that came out of my shop and I had a little something to do with it, I felt like I won the race with you. I'd go to the races and sit in the stands, and I would cheer all my customers on. I didn't care which customer won. I didn't have any favorites, to be honest with you. So any one of my customers that would win, I felt like I won the race. So that was easy to kind of step back from crew chiefing a little bit. But you know, we had a great time winning all them races. We had a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of fun, and some of it you're not going to hear. Needless to say, we just had a great time. I've always ran a team like, I'm an NFL person that likes to watch the NFL, but I like to watch the coaches in the NFL. I don't really, the coaches put the whole team together, and it's kind of like, I always felt that was my job, was to have all the players in line. You have to have the tire changes, you have to have the fuel man, you have to have everybody in line to win a race. There is no one person that wins that race. It's not the driver, it's not the crew chief, it's the whole team. And the whole team starts right at the shop, like somebody else had already mentioned here today. You have to spend countless hours working on that car to make sure that nothing flies off of it. And one of the things that was brought up that my cars didn't break, well, owning Northeast Race Cars, if stuff started falling off of my cars, it doesn't reflect on me, it reflects on Northeast Race Cars, and that's not good for business, so we had to pay special attention to all that. I was always a firm believer that somebody had to drive the car fast and somebody had to make it go fast. And I know there's been a couple of exceptions out there that people were able to do it out of the cockpit, call the shots of pitting and not pitting, or what to do for chassis changes, but that doesn't work that well in my book. I've always been a person that felt that somebody had to be the boss, and I was happy to be that person. I was lucky enough to have a lot of great crew members follow me. Even when I got out, I would get out for a few years, I'd get back in, and I would race again and win again. And that's because I had a lot of the same crew members that would come along with me. So I think that the biggest thing to do is surround yourself with great people if you want to win races. I had drivers like my old friend Archie Sherman, who we talked about, Seekonk Speedway. He passed away recently. He was a great mentor for me back in the old Vinny Anarumo days and when we were together. We had Mike Sawyer, which was a dear friend of mine. He didn't stay in the sport too long, but we won races together. Then there was Wayne Dion. In 1985, we won 10 races alone at Thompson Speedway and won the championship by over 500 points. We could have stayed home the last 4 races, and that was a pretty good accomplishment. And he showed up with his crew to work on that car when we did put the deal together, and his crew's still with him. I could see that, and it's nice to see you guys again. We had people like Ricky Fuller. That was always an adventure. We won a lot of races, didn't we? We won 4 in a row at Stafford. We wouldn't show up for every week because he was running the U2 on a modified tour. So we would show up when we could. So we had to start 23rd, 24th. We would go around and warn everybody, get out of my way because I'm coming. We won 4 in a row like that, and won a few at Thompson, and we had some good times together. Then, of course, there was the championships with Teddy Christopher, which he was too tough to tame for a lot of people, and everybody thought we were like oil and water when we were racing together. We actually got along really well together racing, and he respected me, I respected him. We didn't go out for dinner with our wives, but we did race hard together, and we were a tough team to beat. We won the championship in '88 and '89 at Thompson Speedway, back when I owned my own cars, and then I moved on to Jeff Fuller, which was mentioned earlier, and was actually with the John Sneed 55 car, which was ugly as sin, and we showed up at Martinsville, and we set fast time, and we won the race and led all 200 laps. They said we couldn't make it on fuel, we couldn't make it on a lot of things, but we did, the same set of tires, and of course NASCAR took everything apart on it because the SK guys can't go to Martinsville and win, and we won there, and then we won tons of races. John Sneed was a great car owner, then Sheba Racing was born. That was in 1990. In 1992, we won the championship together. Chris Kopech, I raced with him, won races. He's a great guy. Everybody loves him. Mike Uanisco, I mean, how can you not like Mike? Mike was one of the greatest guys. We won races everywhere with him, Stafford and Martinsville and all over. Jimmy Blewett, well, he's a tough one. Another tough one to tame. Then came Teddy again in 2006. The end of 2006, we got together, and there was one time at Stafford Speedway, you know, whenever they announced Teddy Christopher, of course, half the crowd booed, half the crowd cheered, you know. So we're at Stafford, and they're doing in-car introductions, and Teddy's sitting in the car, and they announce him, and everybody cheers. So I clicked the radio. I says, "Hey, Teddy, did you hear that?" He goes, "Yeah, what do you think's up with that?" I says, "They must know I'm on the team." You're shot. He was a great guy to race with. Then there was, another guy that we knew each other forever, but didn't know each other, and that was Mike Stefanik. We both lived in Rhode Island. There was more rumors that we were getting together for 25 years. Oh, they're getting together, they're getting together. Well, I never even talked to the guy. You know, we see each other, we'd wave. I have to beat him, he has to beat me. That's how I looked at it, you know. It's like we went there to socialize. And I got to race with Mike and found out what kind of a guy that Mike Stefanik really was. And he's been up to the beach house with us, and him and Julie, and really, really great people. And it's a tragic accident that happened to him. And we won a lot of races together. We won Bristol, we won Loudon, we won Thompson, we won all over the place. Then with the Outlaw car, with the '66 with Eddie Marceau, everywhere we showed up, we won with that. And he was a great driver, and that's why he's a 9-time champion. And then we moved on again. After Mike was Tommy Barrett. Tommy's a great little driver, and it's too bad that it didn't work out. He won Bristol, Tennessee for us, being a rookie and never even seeing the place. 18 years old, started 18th, drove to the front, and him and Ryan Newman were going at it for a little bit there, and it was kind of fun to watch the kid drive. And, hopefully he still keeps going. And after that, we started just doing the parts trailers, and we were at Seekonk for that last tri-track race. And ironically, I sold Northeast Race Cars a few weeks ago. Everybody wants to know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be around. I'm going to be around the racetracks. I sold it to a real good friend of mine. He's only a couple of miles from my place. So I will be with him quite a bit and at the racetracks quite a bit for all our customers still and for everybody there. When I first started in this business, I learned a lot. My mentor was Bob Cuneo from Chassis Dynamics. And I told him that once before, and he was like shocked. He says, nobody ever tells me that, and I just learned a lot of things from him, and he was a great guy. And Val Lasur, I'm really sorry he's not here. He's my buddy. I wish he was here. He's got some good pictures of me. And I'd like to thank my family and everybody else and all my friends and the staff that was here. And I'd like to thank everybody from NEAR for this honor. Thank you.
You were making me a little nervous. If you talked any longer, I was afraid that you were going to fire Wayne Dion for the third time. I'm glad we didn't get that far. Making our next presentation, one of the great historians of New England motorsports. I remember his picture page that used to be in the Thompson programs. The man responsible for that and a lot of preservation of New England history, R.A. Sylvia.
It's my pleasure today to be the inductor for my partner of 20-some years in the museum, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, Pro 9, Rick Mariscal. I think we first ran into each other sometime in the early 80s, shortly after NEAR was formed. We both joined and lived about 20 miles apart, didn't really know each other, but I kept seeing him here and there with vintage cars, and I said, this guy's all right. And started putting shows on. He'd bring his car to a show, and I'd have some photos of programs or posters to go with it. And I just escalated from there, and we felt that the microphone died. We felt that there was a need for some kind of museum, something to preserve the tradition of the pioneers of our sport. And New England is fortunate right now. After a couple of decades, we have three great big museums. Loudon, of course, Dick Bergman's operation up at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and the Bouchard Family Museum in Fitchburg, and Pro 9 Motorsports in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And also there's like Bentley Warren's got quite a layout up his saloon in Arundel. You can get a good meal and a drink too besides. And even the Stanley Family Museum in Kingfield, Maine, home of the Stanley Steamers, which were Stanley brothers went into this Hall of Fame years ago. And that's what I'm going to let Rick expound a little more on himself, because we're both kind of quiet guys, so it's his turn to talk a little more. But he took the initiative upon himself to get this done. We could get no help from local government, state government, or most anybody. And one thing I really learned about Rick's character, he's a hell of a guy, because even to this day, throughout this crowd here is his lifelong friends, guys he went to school with, got involved in motorsports, varying degrees, even figure eight racing, where they won a lot of races. Rick won a lot of races, and not races, but autocross events. But it's a sign of the man's character that his friends are still with him, and they help out at the museum whenever they can. If we need anything, they're always ready. So upon saying that, I'm going to invite Rick up here, because my bad hip is killing me, and it's time for him to get on up here. So come on up, Rick.
I think this mic needs a little Viagra. So, well, thank you, Bob, and thank you for your service on this Veterans Day weekend. Like Bob said, we became friends later on in both of our racing careers. He started as a as a young man getting attached like a lot of the children today, they can get, somebody will put them in their car and the next thing you know, they get bitten by the fever. Well, that fever fell on me when I was 5 years old at the Lonsdale Sports Arena. But first of all, I'd like to congratulate all today's fellow inductees. I am humbled and honored to be part of this prestigious group. My interest in the sport, like I said, started when a visit to Lonsdale Sports Arena at 5 years old. Although I never really became friends with Bob, R.A., till later in life when we both joined NEAR. Like he said, he saw me at the events bringing cars around, and I needed someone that had the memorabilia to go with my display. But I really didn't know who he was until I put the puzzle together. You see, when I was going to school in high school, I wasn't really paying attention to high school. I was carrying around cavalcade of auto racing magazines. These are the original magazines. As you can see, they're in pretty rough shapes. I still have them today. Maybe that's why I am a historian. I didn't throw anything away either. And don't tell me you throw your stuff away too, because I get it all from you. When you're moving or when you're cleaning house, you say, call Pro9, he'll come and get it. But in these books, there were stories written by Mr. R.A. Sylvia. Back when I was in high school, I didn't know him. I didn't even know he was from Rhode Island. Never mind, just 20 minutes up the road. I was just concerned with, I want to race. I want to be a part of this. This is what I want to do. So, anyways, after reading stories that Bob wrote and looking at the pictures, looking at pictures of Bugsy Stevens, right on, buddy, there he is right over there. He's like my dad nowadays. He calls me his business agent. But, look at pictures, learning the names of Bugsy Stevens, Eddie Flemke, George Summers, and pictures that were taken by Dick Bergman, Johnny Mercury, or Bill Balsa. I had no idea that these people would be part of my life in the future, and I am honored to call them friends since I became a member of NEAR. Joining NEAR in 1983, but going back to my racing career where I wanted to be a Richard Petty, but I wasn't from an automotive background family. My friend Frank Bruzi, who I went to school with at St. Raphael's Academy, he used to see me reading these books instead of doing my homework. I would ask him the answers. I would continue reading these stories by R.A. and looking at the pictures. And it was at that time that Frank said to me, he says, if you're going to race cars, my neighbor, Billy Linden in Warwick, next to our summer house, he races cars. I'll introduce you. So I said, all right. So ended up going down one weekend, met Billy. He said, I can use the help. My kid, I'll teach you. So he showed me the finer points of building stock cars for Seekonk Speedway. Who do you think was the first one to paint me and Billy Linden's car? Wayne Dion. I can't believe how much just in this room we all have together. I look around, I see the faces. We've all done the same thing. But, I mean, Vinny Inarumo, my cars ran wheel to wheel, bump fenders with Vinny, with Billy Linden behind the wheel. It was one year competing that my number was always number 9. For some reason, I've always been surrounded by the number 9. And Brad LaFontaine, as he mentioned, he was working with our good friend, yeah, I'm losing my mind here right now. I'm so nervous. But he said, You know, he was parked next to me in the pits. And we were having a good year. And Archie Sherman was a good friend. And that year, Archie ended up beating us in points. He finished 9th, and I finished 10th. And Seekonk Speedway, where's Adrian? Your father come up with this great idea. Oh, if you finish in the top 10 in points, you got to run that number next year. I lost my number 9. That was the worst year I had after that. So that didn't work out too good for me. But I would not be standing here today if it weren't for not some special people that have been part of my racing life for the last 49 years. When I decided to build my own, these high school friends came to me and I told them, I want to race cars, I want to race cars. I didn't even have a garage in my backyard in Lincoln. We moved from Pawtucket to Lincoln. Didn't have a garage. But all these guys at work that I met, right away, right off the bat, they all came together. And I'd like to thank all of them. Most of them are here today. We got to be known when I first started as Ricardo Enterprises, or engineering, as some people say. But when we didn't have a garage, but we had the passion and the desire to continue, we got to be known as those guys from Lincoln that build those race cars, Backyard Enterprises, BYE. And that lasted, and those stickers were on many, many historic cars, going back to Lenny Bowler and Fred DeSaro. But those guys, again, like I said, my life changed when I decided that racing was getting too expensive and I needed to find some other way of doing this. But these guys, and let me mention some names here. Doug Vaughn is here today, I'm sure. Thank you. Joby Tucker, Paul Grandowski, Gus Branco, Steve Ribeiro. Thank you for being there today. I love you guys. I could never have done it without you. I thank you for your support with the museum. They're still with me today after all these years. But after losing the last of my parents at 9 years old and being the youngest of 5, it wouldn't have seemed likely that this could happen, this racing life that I wanted. Our family has, like I said, no automotive background, but we share a special bond and a lot of love and support for each other. And I love you and thank you. It was Ronnie Pond and Wayne Darling and Mickey Miller who saw the passion in my heart to help preserve the history of the sport. It was after the 1983, the anniversary of the Spring Sizzler, that Ronnie Pond, who owned Old Blue at that time, was asked to bring it out to pace the field. Well, I was on his crew and Wayne Darling working together in the sports car series of IMSA. Well, after we brought Old Blue out to that Spring Sizzler, I was so impressed. And I grew up watching Bugsy, and I grew up watching Freddie and cheering them on at all the events. But I was so impressed with the amount of fans that approached that car and us and told me stories, which I already knew, but because reading these books over and over again, but I was so impressed. I said, somebody's got to save this stuff before it ends up getting trashed. And it was Ronnie Pond, Wayne Darling that called me that following year and said, listen, you want to come back and get this car and show it with Near, because Near was just formed in 1981. So I said, really? That was asking me if I wanted a cup ride. When I got in the Old Blue, my first laps at Waterford Speedball at a Near historic event, it changed my life. I knew at that time that these things had to be saved. that we needed to reach out and find these cars, these historic cars and this memorabilia, so we could carry on the tradition. I had already joined NEAR, and I knew that this club was going to bring it to the top, and I wanted to be a part of it. And we carried on. And this led to getting the collection from Lenny Bola, Sonny Cazella. I can't thank them enough. They didn't know me from Adam. And I asked Sonny at Riverside Park one night, because I knew he had a Pinto sitting in the yard. Sonny, why can't we get that? I'm not asking you for any money. I want to take this. I want to put it back together and let people remember the joy that this gave them. He said, come on down, kid, we'll talk about it. Well, I showed up that week. The garage doors opened. What do you want? Everything came to me. I couldn't believe it. And everybody has been that way ever since. So, like I said, Bugsy and the Cazellas, the Summers, Pro9 doesn't exist without the support of all my contributors, my supporters, and members. Thank you for your trust and faith in me to make this possible, and especially my son, Ryan. Probably would still be winning behind the wheel if not for supporting our museum and what we do. And of course, we all have wives and girlfriends. My friend Carol, and partner in life. Thank you. We have been through so much of hard times together. I love you and thank you for your support. Well, in closing, I can't again stress the fact what this club, this Hall of Fame means to me and should mean to all of us here in this room. If you know of a neighbor, and I've seen this recently with Ricky Summers at Seekonk Speedway at the Haunted 100. He came up to me and he told me, he said, this is my nephew and this is a neighbor. Remember, we all were taken to the races by a neighbor. We were exposed to it. And hopefully they'll carry it on. And maybe, if they're not going to be a race car driver or a car owner or a builder, maybe they will just be inspired to stand up, join NEAR, help with the Hall of Fame, help with the preservation of the sport. And we have applications available at the t-shirt table. Thank you, God bless you, good night.
Next up, one of the great voices in New England racing. He's a voice of many tours, including the Valente Modified Series, the Isthmus Super Modifieds, the Tri-Track Series, and for the next 2 minutes, he'll be the voice of the Hall of Fame, John Spence.
I love working with this guy. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very honored to be asked to make the next presentation. This gentleman that is being inducted here this afternoon, I've known since the off-season of 1980 and 81. And how that came to be is he called me at the radio station that I was employed at the time in New Hampshire, and he identified himself as Bob Weber. I didn't know who that was. So in the conversation, which was very brief, he says, Jim Cheney told me that I need to talk to you. Okay? We made that arrangement to have that conversation the week after at my home. Spent 2 hours, and the decision was made to join Bob with his new venture, and that was purchasing Star Speedway. I left Lee Raceway to go down to Star under Auto Racing of New England. That was the sanction that Bob debuted. So I think I was the first to go from up the street to down the street. You'd have to be from our area to understand that. Let me tell you a story about Big Bob. He was born in Amesbury, Massachusetts. He attended Amesbury schools and was a graduate of Amesbury High School class of 1965. He furthered his education at Worcester Polytechnical Institute and Merrimack College. He started his career at Triad Engineering in Burlington, Massachusetts, where he partnered with two friends in developing the circuit board of the original Pong video game, as well as several other projects for the thriving video game industry at that time. Bob purchased Star Speedway in Epping, 1980, and later purchased Hudson Speedway in 1989. He received much recognition and many awards from his auto racing peers. Because of his love of the supermodifieds, a division that he had heard may be eliminated from Star due to the low car counts, he would have no part of that. So he figured, if I own the place, the division will be safe. Ultimately, he endured through thick and thin with the Supers as a weekly division until the end of the 2000 season. Even to this day, Bob is the reason supermodified racing still exists here in New England. Other career highlights, or as we all call the Web. The creation of the 350 Supermodified division. Bob and the late Randy Whitcomb developed a set of rules to bring older Supermodifieds back to life, and the division bloomed. Along the way, Rob Wilcox even won a NASCAR National Championship behind the wheel of his number 08 car, winning a staggering 17 races in 18 starts during his championship campaign. This division still continues to grow. 39 350 Supers registered for competition in 2019 at Star Speedway. Bob didn't just limit his attention to his own weekly classes. He made sure the state of racing throughout the region was healthy. When the NEMA midgets were going to split into two groups with a rival class, it was Bob who ordered a sit-down and brought a mutual agreement to both sides, which has helped to keep the NEMA group alive today. Not afraid to develop ideas, he was the first to put Pro Stocks on an 8-inch tire to help equalize the competition and take away some of the high-dollar engines that had made their way into the division. During his tenure at Hudson Speedway, he also developed the Outlaw class. That was a melting pot of cars from all over New England that could race at Star or Hudson with simple rules. There was only 5 of them. His biggest creation was the Halloween Howler, an event that is now nationwide, with competitors coming from as far away as Japan to compete in this annual event. At its peak, the event drew a record 600 plus entries for the one-day event, and the New Hampshire State Police deemed it a sellout and had to shut down the ticket windows. Bob's biggest skill, though, was his people skills. He was a shoulder to cry on, a confidant that you could express things to, and was everybody's friend. People would say they went to complain, argue a call with Bob, and they left not even knowing what they were there to argue about. Bob Weber started many racing careers. Derek Griffith, one of the bright young stars of today, and Matt Swanson, currently the driver of the famed Old Blue on the NASCAR Whelen Modified Tour. A 37-year career for his love of the Supermodifieds. Bob passed away January of 2018 at the age of 70. I'm really happy to say that his children, his son Bobby, his grandchildren, Jamie and Tim, and of course the watchful eye of his bride Jean, Star Speedway is red hot right now. A lot of people are talking about it. The last couple of years they've had a very good racing season each year, and they continue to grow. Healthy car counts, healthy crowds, and it's really good to see for the Webers. With all that said, my buddy Bob truly deserves this induction into the 2019 Hall of Fame. And one thing I'll say, a lot of people don't know this, but I do, because I used to get the phone calls. Bob Weber is a Patriot fan, but down deep inside, he still loved the New York Giants, who are losing to the Jets right now. So, Jeannie, Bobby, come on up for the presentation. This is Gene Weber, Bobby Jr., who's doing a heck of a job at Star.
Thank you, John. This is one thing I always wanted my dad to be in before he passed away. And it's a big honor now. And one of the things I do want to say is I didn't even realize what was happening there. One of the coolest things of the day was to see Jack Doyle going on the same day. My dad and Jack, as Dick Bergen said, everything from New England Dragway, they were really good friends, and to see this happen on the same day was really cool. So congratulations, Jack. My dad, I don't know how many of you work with your dad day in and day out, but working with him for 30 plus years full time, 24 hours a day, isn't always the easiest thing. But like John said, it's the people things that my dad did that really instilled a lot in me and made me see how much of an impact he made on the sport of racing. One thing I always saw was how much he did care, and he thought of every single racer that came through Star Speedway as one of his kids. He wasn't always big on the facility itself, but if you were a racer, he would take the shirt off his back for you and give it to you right there. Many people have told me this over the years, and I've seen it firsthand. Days when we'd have a big paying race and you wouldn't see a full field of cars show up, he'd still pay every dime of that purse that he promised, and I'd ask him why. There's not many people here, there's not enough cars to cover the purse, and he'd say, Bob, you can't penalize the racers that did show up to support you. That's the ones that we need to care about. The ones that stayed home, it's their loss. Don't take it as a negative. And I try to remember that to this day. And as John said, Star is on the upswing. This is the first time in 39 years this year we did not have a single rain out all year long. And I just try to remember everything my dad told me. And in closing, I'm just proud that he's into the Hall of Fame this year.
Well, I think there is only one thing left to do. Wave the checkered flag. We'd like to thank everybody for coming, all honorees and past honorees, like Ricky Fuller and everybody else. We need you to go to the left side of the room for pictures.